It was January 15th, 1943, in the snow-covered village of Tarnów, southern Poland. The cold air bit through the trembling hands of Jakub, a boy of just 10 years, as he wandered aimlessly between empty houses. Silence was broken only by the crackling of firewood in a distant hearth. The sharp smell of smoke mingled with the bitter scent of frozen earth, a haunting reminder of recent flames that had consumed nearby fields. Jakub clutched the last piece of bread close to his chest, eyes wide with fear and hunger, breaths forming white clouds in the frigid air. He was alone, or so he believed, told that his parents had died in a bombing raid, a cruel lie meant to keep him compliant. His trembling figure alone against the vast, uncaring winter reflected a world turned upside down by war. If stories like this move you as deeply as they move me, subscribe to the channel and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. These forgotten stories deserve to live again, and your voice helps make that happen. Jakub had once been a farmer's son. Before the war, his days were marked by routine and simplicity, tending cattle alongside his father, learning the rhythms of planting and harvest under the warm Polish sun, dreaming of a future filled with peace and family. Life was fragile, but it was theirs. His mother's gentle voice and his father's steady hands were constants, the quiet anchors of childhood. They feared little beyond the winter's harsh bite or an early frost threatening the crops, unprepared for the storm looming on the horizon. That storm came in the terrifying roar of German tanks and soldiers trampling through fields, the sky blackened with smoke from bombings that shattered homes and spirits alike. Food became scarce, the warmth of home replaced by cold fear. Jakub's village faced forced evacuations, families torn apart under the harsh orders of occupying forces. His parents disappeared during a raid. The official story given to Jakub was of their death, a lie imposed to mask a darker reality. From that moment, Jakub's world spiraled into turmoil. He was rounded up with other children and sent to a labor farm far from the village, forced into work, carrying heavy loads, milking cows in freezing barns, picking fruit with blistered hands, yet never allowed to play, learn, or simply be a child. He was told he was an orphan, told to forget family, told to obey. The shadow of hunger was constant, the weight of loneliness crushing. Yet, in the midst of suffering, something unexpected arose. Jakub, fragile and scared, found compassion for a younger child locked away with no one to care for him. Against all reason, he risked punishment to share his meager meal, to cradle the small boy through nights, thick with cold and fear. His defiance was silent but fierce, a spark of humanity amid the crushing machinery of war. The true horrors of World War II stretched beyond the battlefield. In junction with the brutal German forced labor regime, nearly 12 million civilians from occupied territories were exploited, their childhoods stolen, their identities erased. The labor farms in Poland were grim places, marked by dire shortages, harsh discipline, and relentless toil. These children were pawns in a brutal system, their stories buried beneath layers of history. Jakub's courage was tested when the guards discovered the stolen loaf shared with the younger boy. A tense moment of silence passed as Jakub's heart pounded, the threat of beatings hanging heavy in the cold air. But fate held, for now. Jakub's quiet act of kindness stood against the harshness, a fragile beacon sustaining hope. In the aftermath, Jakub's small defiance saved the boy's life, forging a bond between them that offered brief sanctuary. But Jakub's story, like many others, was lost to time, silenced by fear, shame, and the destruction of records as the war's fury faded. For decades, the world forgot the faces of these children, the unpaid workers whose sacrifices were unrecorded. Decades later, a historian in Krakow, poring over archival documents, uncovered the faded ledger of children sent from Tarnów to forced labor farms. In those yellowed pages, Jakub's name appeared alongside dozens of others, forgotten victims of war's cruelty. This rediscovery rekindled a long-lost narrative of resilience and humanity amidst despair. We end not with the fades of war, but with the flame of remembrance. Jakub's story reminds us that courage is not wielded through weapons or rank, but through small acts of kindness, quiet rebellions that shaped history's unseen face. In a world shattered by conflict, the human spirit flickered brightest in forgotten children like him. Remembering Jakub means remembering every unseen child, every lost life, every quiet defiance. Their voices echo through time to remind us, even in darkness, light endures. In the cold spring of 1943, Jakub found himself transported to a German labor camp on Przemysłowa Street in Łódź, Poland. This camp was no refuge, but a grim factory of human suffering, designed expressly for Polish children like Jakub, forcibly seized from their homes. Over 3,000 children passed through its gates, many as young as 10, some even younger, condemned to relentless toil far beyond their years. Jakub's days blurred into a harsh rhythm, waking before dawn in cramped wooden barracks with cracked windows, the air thick with the smell of sweat and fear. The children labored for endless hours, repairing army boots, weaving mats for military vehicles, small cogs in the vast machinery of the Nazi war effort. Food was meager, punishments brutal. The threat of beatings loomed constant, and the crushing weight of hunger gnawed at their fragile bodies. Yet, beneath the cruelty, Jakub's spirit flickered with defiance. He quietly shared warmth and hope with others, nursing the weakest and comforting those broken by despair. In the isolation wards, where the smallest and sickliest were confined, he found the courage to keep going. Each day a quiet rebellion against the forces determined to erase them. The camp itself was a microcosm of Nazi oppression. Children were branded with red crosses on their coats for punishments, consigned to penal companies tasked with menial, exhausting labor like paving alleys or cleaning latrines. Some were sent to agricultural work on a 160-hectare estate nearby, tilling fields and tending farm animals, not for their own survival but to fuel the German war machine. Girls mended torn uniforms or knitted scarves, while boys worked in sewing rooms or repaired backpacks. The historical reality behind Jakub's suffering traces the ruthless Nazi policy toward Polish children and civilians, kidnapping hundreds of thousands across occupied territories, subjecting them to forced labor camps, brutal Germanization programs, or worse. In Łódź alone, the Poland Jugendverwahrlager camp was not merely a prison, but a calculated attempt to break youth into compliance and erase their Polish identity. The conditions were harsh beyond measure, with starvation, sickness, and death as grim companions. Jakub's defining moment came during a bleak winter evening when guards discovered food he had secretly conserved to feed a younger child. The chilling silence that followed threatened to seal their fate. Every breath was heavy with fear. The camp commander's footsteps echoed through the barracks as Jakub stared into the cold gaze of authority, torn between terror and resolve. It was a moment suspended in time, a fragile heartbeat between survival and destruction. This moment of unexpected courage embodied a profound defiance. Jakub's willingness to risk punishment to shield another child spoke of human kindness amid the dehumanization. Though powerless by worldly measures, his small act resonated like a beacon in the darkness, illuminating the indomitable will of children forgotten by history. The consequence was profound: a life saved, a bond forged in adversity, and a flicker of hope that endured beyond the camp walls. Yet Jakub's story, along with so many others, slipped into silence after the war. Records were lost or destroyed, victims too afraid or broken to speak, and the world moved forward. Many survivors never spoke of their torment, weighed down by shame and trauma. Decades later, social historians and archivists would piece together fragments of these hidden narratives. It was an archivist in Krakow who stumbled upon transport lists and camp records, revealing the scale of child labor and suffering in Łódź's forgotten camp. Oral testimonies collected from survivors illuminated the personal cost behind cold statistics. A generation of children marked by pain, but also remarkable courage. The rediscovery stirred new awareness. These forgotten civilians, without weapons or rank, shaped history through their resilience and sacrifice. Their acts of compassion and bravery, often silent, altered lives and defied the darkness of war. Jakub's story closes with a reflection on the power of humanity within despair. Courage does not always roar in battle. Often it whispers in small, unseen acts, sharing a scrap of bread, holding a frightened child, refusing to surrender hope. In remembering Jakub and those like him, we honor the forgotten and find inspiration for a world still in need of kindness amid chaos. Jakub's ordeal was part of an ominous Nazi campaign that sought not only to exploit Polish labor, but to erase the very identity of its children. From December 1942, the Nazi security police established the Poland Jugendverwahrlager der Sicherheitspolizei in Litzmannstadt, better known as the Kinder KZ Łódź, a concentration camp specifically for Polish Christian children deemed delinquent, homeless, or orphaned by the harsh occupation. Here, between 2,000 and 3,000 children were imprisoned under brutal conditions, some as young as 2 years old. The camp was grimly designed to crush childhood. Children were subjected to physical punishments including beatings, solitary confinement, and starvation rations for minor perceived infractions. They were forced into exhausting labor tasks critical to sustaining the German war effort, such as manufacturing goods inside the nearby ghetto or agricultural labor on local estates. The psychological cost was enormous, with children stripped of names, histories, and hope. Jakub and the other children lived in a relentless climate of fear and deprivation. Epidemics swept through the camp due to malnutrition and poor sanitation, killing many prisoners, including the youngest and weakest. Graves were dug in the nearby St. Wojciech cemetery, often without families ever notified. The shadow of death was constant. The Nazi regime's ideological goal was Germanization, stealing children deemed racially valuable to raise as Germans while erasing Polish roots. Those who failed racial examinations were far more likely to be sent to extermination camps such as Auschwitz. During the war, roughly 200,000 Polish children were abducted, with many perishing in camps or forced labor, their identities violently stripped by systematic terror. Jakub's defining moment of courage unfolded in the camp's harsh winter when he risked punishment by stealing bread to share with a younger boy weakened by starvation. When camp guards discovered the hidden food, tension brimmed to a breaking point. The silence that followed threatened to swallow Jakub's future. With every heavy step of the approaching commander, Jakub's heart pounded louder than the winter winds outside. Miraculously, punishment was withheld that day, granting fragile hope a sliver of space. Jakub's act became a quiet revolt against cruelty, a testament to the enduring human spirit in what felt like an utterly broken world. The consequences of his bravery ensured the younger child's survival. More than that, it forged bonds among the prisoners that stoked sparks of hope and humanity amid the relentless darkness. After the war, like so many stories of suffering and survival, Jakub's remained buried in silence. Records destroyed, victims too scarred to recount their past, and a world eager to forget uncomfortable truths hid these stories beneath layers of time. Only in recent decades have historians and archivists recovered fragments, camp lists, survivor testimonies, faded photographs that reveal the tragic scale of children's forced labor and imprisonment in Nazi-occupied Poland. Institutions like the Museum of Polish Children have begun piecing together this history to give Jakub and thousands like him the recognition long overdue. Jakub's story ends as a profound reminder. Courage often does not roar. It whispers through small acts of kindness, resilience in the face of despair, and the will to survive when all seems lost. These forgotten civilians, powerless against weapons and authority, wielded their humanity to quietly shape history's course. In honoring their memory, we acknowledge that the smallest light can pierce the darkest night. Jakub's life and the lives of the countless children exploited and abused during World War II remain a call to recognize the strength of ordinary people in extraordinary times. Jakub's story is a singular thread in the tragic tapestry of Polish children's suffering during World War II. Official records from the German labor camp on Przemysłowa Street in Łódź show that between 2,000 and over 3,000 Polish children passed through its gates. Though the precise number lost to death and brutality remains uncertain, approximately 200 children are confirmed to have died in that single camp alone. Many more unnamed victims buried in forgotten graves. Across Nazi-occupied Poland and Eastern Europe, the scale was staggering. Roughly 200,000 ethnic Polish children, along with many from other Slavic groups, were forcibly abducted, snatched from orphanages, homes, or taken from parents under threat to serve as forced laborers, subjects of ruthless Germanization programs, or victims of horrific medical experiments. These children faced starvation, torture, forced labor, and death, often in camps like Łódź, Gross-Rosen, Ravensbrück, and Auschwitz. Jakub and his fellow prisoners were branded delinquents, forced into exhausting labor designed to fuel the Third Reich's war machine. Some were subjected to physical punishments, including flogging, solitary confinement, or harsh deprivation. Despite being children, they faced the same brutal regime imposed on adult prisoners, a grim testament to the Nazi regime's ruthless disregard for human life. When the Red Army liberated Łódź in January 1945, only a few hundred children remained in the camp, frozen, weakened, haunted by the loss of childhood. Jakub's survival was a quiet act of resilience amid overwhelming cruelty. The war officially ended, but its aftermath left scars unseen. Many survivors like Jakub kept silent from fear or trauma. Records were destroyed or lost, and for decades, the stories of these forced child laborers remained buried beneath layers of history. Only recently have archivists, historians, and museums begun to unearth and share these forgotten narratives. Through painstaking research, testimonies, and recovered documents, the world is slowly acknowledging the vast and brutal extent of children's suffering during the war. Jakub's story, like many forgotten civilians, reveals the human face behind history's numbers. It reminds us that courage is often found in small, quiet acts, an act of sharing bread, a whispered comfort in a dark barracks, a moment of defiance in the face of dehumanization. These are the moments that shaped history's unseen resistance. In a modern world still marked by conflict and displacement, remembering Jakub and others like him is a call to honor forgotten lives, recognize the strength in vulnerability, and commit to a future where no child suffers such loss and injustice again. Their courage endures, quiet but unyielding, a testament to humanity's capacity for hope, even in the darkest times.